He rode past the girl serving drinks 3 times before stopping. What made the quiet cowboy look twice when no one else did? Dust hit her mouth as the wind snapped hard through Red Hollow Pass, and the tray slipped in her hands. The glass tipped, caught mid-fall by a rough palm. Hooves thundered nearby, leather creaked, and somewhere behind her, a man shouted orders no one questioned. She looked up just as he let go, like it meant nothing. But his eyes stayed a second too long. Then the storm broke loose, and he didn't ride the way the others did. What did he see that no one else ever had? Tell me what you think he noticed first. The wind came down from the hills before sunset, carrying dust across the yard and rattling the loose hinge on the front gate of Stone Ridge Ranch. It had been doing that for years. No one had fixed it. Evelyn Brooks stood at the long wooden table in the kitchen, drying a row of tin cups with a cloth that had gone thin at the edges. The room smelled of boiled beans and wood smoke. Voices drifted in from the front room. Laughter, the low murmur of men talking cattle, the soft rise and fall of women who knew when to speak and when to pause. She stacked the cups one inside the other, counted them without thinking. When she reached the last one, she wiped it again, slower this time, then set it down. From where she stood, she could see the edge of the gathering through the doorway. Lamps had been lit early. Their glow stayed close to the center of the room, leaving the corners dim. That was where she usually stood. Someone called for more water. Not her name. Just the need. Evelyn lifted the tray and stepped into the room. The boards creaked under her boots. Dust clung to the hem of her dark skirt. She moved between chairs and shoulders, careful not to brush against anyone unless she had to. Conversations bent around her without breaking. A man reached for a glass before she had fully stopped walking. Another laughed at something she hadn't heard. At the far end, Charlotte Whitman stood near the window where the light was best. Her dress caught it easy, pale blue, pressed smooth, fitted close at the waist, a ribbon at her throat. She smiled at the right moments, her hand resting lightly against Victor Langford's arm. Victor stood tall beside her, his coat clean despite the dust outside. His voice carried just enough to be heard without asking for it. People listened when he spoke. They leaned in without realizing. Evelyn set down 2 glasses near the edge of the table. No one looked up. She turned, shifting the tray against her hip. One of the legs on the table had been uneven for years. She knew exactly where it sat wrong. Her foot moved around it without looking. A laugh broke louder than the rest. Someone clapped Victor on the shoulder. Charlotte lowered her eyes, smiling like she'd practiced it. Evelyn stepped back. The tray tilted. A glass slid, just enough to catch the light as it moved toward the edge. A hand reached in before it fell. Not fast, not rushed, just certain. The glass stopped. Evelyn's fingers tightened on the tray. She looked up. He stood close enough that she could see the dust along the seam of his sleeve. The brim of his hat cast a shadow across his face, but not enough to hide his eyes. Wyatt Cole. He didn't say anything at first, just set the glass back where it had been, steadying it with 2 fingers like it mattered. Then, quiet enough that it didn't carry past her, he said, "Careful." Evelyn nodded. It wasn't the word. It was the way he had looked at her before he spoke. Not past her, not through her, at her, like she was something that existed in the same room as everything else. She took a breath she hadn't meant to notice. "Thank you," she said. He gave a small nod, already stepping back, already returning to the place near the wooden post where he had been before, like nothing had happened. No one turned. No one asked. The conversation picked up where it had left off. Victor was speaking again. Charlotte's hand rested where it had been. The lamps burned steady. Evelyn moved on. She finished the round, collected empty glasses, wiped the edge of the table where someone had spilled a little water. Her hands did what they always did. Sure, quiet, unnoticed. But once, as she crossed the room again, she felt it. That same stillness. She didn't turn right away. When she did, Wyatt wasn't looking at the others. He was standing where the light thinned, one shoulder against the post, watching the room like a man who had no reason to be part of it. His gaze met hers for the space of a single breath. No signal, no question, just recognition. Evelyn looked away first. She set the tray down in the kitchen and stood there a moment longer than she needed to. The voices in the other room blurred together. A chair scraped. Someone asked for another drink. She picked up the kettle. The wind rattled the hinge on the front gate again. Same sound. Same place. When she stepped back into the room, nothing had changed, except she knew, without needing to check again, that somewhere in that space someone had seen her and had not looked away. The gathering ran late. By the time the last wagon rolled out and the lamps burned low, the house settled into its usual shape. Chairs pushed back, dishes stacked by the basin, voices gone. Evelyn stood at the sink with her sleeves rolled just past her wrists, rinsing plates in water that had already turned cloudy. The window above the basin was cracked open. Night air slipped in, cool and thin, carrying the smell of dry grass and distant horses. Behind her, footsteps crossed the floorboards. Margaret Whitman did not rush. She never did. "The Langfords will be back in 2 days," she said, as if continuing a conversation that had never been spoken aloud. "Charlotte will need proper things packed for the drive." Evelyn set a plate on the rack. Water dripped slow from its edge. "I'll have it ready," she said. Margaret paused near the table. Her fingers brushed a folded napkin, smoothing a crease that didn't matter. "You'll be going with them." Evelyn's hand stilled just long enough for the water to cool against her skin. "Yes, ma'am." Margaret nodded once, already satisfied. She'll need someone who understands how to keep things in order. The words hung there. Not praise, not request, a place assigned. When the door closed behind her, the kitchen returned to quiet. Evelyn finished the dishes, wiped down the counter, set the last cup upside down to dry. She didn't look toward the front room. She didn't need to. Morning came early. The yard was already awake when she stepped out with a bucket. Horses tied along the rail, saddles laid across posts, men moving in short, practiced lines, checking straps, tightening cinches, counting what needed counting. The sky stretched wide and pale. No clouds, no promise of shade. Evelyn crossed the yard without hurry, keeping her steps even over the packed dirt. She set the bucket near the trough and filled it, watching the water settle before lifting it again. Voices carried from near the gate. Victor Langford stood with 2 men, one hand resting on the top rail. His coat was already brushed clean, boots polished enough to catch light even in dust. He spoke in that same measured tone, each word placed where it belonged. When he turned, his eyes landed on her. Not by accident. "You'll be riding with us," he said. It wasn't a question. Evelyn shifted the bucket to her other hand. "Yes, sir." His gaze held a moment longer than needed. Not searching, not curious, assessing. "Stay near the rear line," he added. "Out of the way." She nodded. He gave a small tilt of his head, as if that settled the matter, and turned back to his conversation. Evelyn walked on. Near the far end of the yard, a saddle had been set aside. Not new, but well kept. The leather dark from use, the stitching tight where it mattered. She stopped beside it. The strap hung loose. Before she could reach for it, a hand moved in from the side and caught the end of the leather. "Wyatt." He didn't look at her right away. just pulled the strap through, checked the buckle, then tugged once to test the hold. "It'll shift on the ridge if it's left like that," he said. His voice stayed low, same as before. Evelyn watched his hands. Steady, no wasted motion. "I can fix it," she said. "I know." He let the strap settle, then stepped back just enough to give her space, not turning away, not stepping closer, just there. Evelyn reached for the saddle, adjusted it the way she'd been shown years ago, pulling the leather firm, testing it once, then again. When she finished, she looked up. He was watching her. Not the saddle, not the yard behind her. Her. For a second, neither of them moved. Then he gave a slight nod, like something had been confirmed, and stepped aside. That was all. Charlotte's voice rose from across the yard, light and easy. She stood near Victor now, her gloves clean, her hat tied just right beneath her chin. She laughed at something he said, leaning in like she belonged there. Evelyn lifted the saddle and carried it toward the horse tied near the fence. The leather creaked under her grip. The animal shifted once, then stilled. She worked in quiet. Cinch tight. Stirrups even. When she finished, she rested her hand along the horse's neck for a moment longer than needed. From the corner of her eye, she saw it. Victor again. Not looking at Charlotte this time, looking past her, toward the far side of the yard, toward Wyatt. The glance lasted no more than a breath. Then it was gone. But something had shifted. Not loud, not spoken. Just a line drawn where there hadn't been one before. Evelyn lowered her hand and stepped back. Dust lifted under her boots as the first group started toward the trail. The road out of Stone Ridge stretched long and dry, cutting through low hills that held heat even in the early hours. She mounted without help, settled into the saddle, didn't look back. But as the line began to move, she felt it again. That same quiet presence, not close enough to touch, not far enough to miss. And this time she knew it wasn't going away. The trail narrowed by midday. What had been open land turned to broken ground, the kind that forced a man to watch his footing and his herd at the same time. Red Hollow Pass stretched ahead, dry and uneven, stone rising in low ridges that funneled both wind and movement into a single direction. Dust clung to everything. Evelyn rode near the back, where the ground showed its truth first. Loose rock, soft patches, places a hoof could slip if it wasn't guided right. She kept her eyes down more than up, reading the land the way she'd been taught, not the way people spoke about it. Ahead, Charlotte's dress still caught what little light broke through the dust. She rode close to Victor, matching his pace without asking for it. The air shifted. It happened slow at first. A change in the wind. Not stronger, just wrong. Evelyn felt it before she saw it. The horse beneath her lifted its head, ears turning. A low sound moved through the herd. Not panic. Not yet. Just unease. Wyatt was farther up the line, but not beyond sight. He had turned in his saddle, scanning the edges, not the center. That was when the sky changed. Clouds rolled in from the west, low and fast, cutting off the light in a way that didn't belong to evening. The heat dropped just enough to notice. A rider shouted something ahead. Another answered. The herd tightened without command. Hooves struck harder against the ground. Dust rose thicker, then shifted sideways as the wind came sharp across the pass. Evelyn drew the reins in a touch. The horse moved under her, restless now. The first crack of thunder came from a distance. It wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. The herd broke. It didn't start with a run. It started with one steer turning where it shouldn't, pressing into another, then another, a ripple that moved faster than any man could stop. "Push them in," someone shouted. Voices rose. Commands cut through the wind. Horses moved to close the line. Victor didn't shout. He turned. His horse shifted under him, then moved, not toward the herd, but along its edge, angling out where the ground opened wider. Charlotte followed. No hesitation. Evelyn saw it in a single glance. Then the ground moved under her. A steer surged past, close enough that she felt the heat off its flank. Her horse jolted sideways. She pulled hard, trying to steady it, but the footing gave beneath them. Across the line, Charlotte's horse reared, front legs lifting too high. She cried out, her hands slipping on the reins. Evelyn didn't think. She swung down before the saddle had fully settled, boots hitting the ground hard. She moved forward, catching Charlotte's arm, pulling her free just as the horse twisted. "Down," Evelyn said, her voice low but firm. Charlotte stumbled. The ground shifted under both of them. A shadow cut through the dust. Fast. A body between them and the surge. Wyatt. He didn't slow. Didn't call out. He moved straight into the line of motion, one hand catching Evelyn's shoulder, the other bracing against the push of the herd. "Move," he said. Not loud. Certain. Evelyn pulled Charlotte with her, stepping sideways, then again, finding the angle where the herd's force slid past instead of through them. A steer broke off from the line, its movement sharp and blind. Wyatt turned just enough to take the impact along his side, the force knocking the breath from Hooves, but not his footing. He held. Just long enough. The ground dipped ahead, a low cut in the rock where the herd split around the edge instead of over it. "Go," he said. Evelyn didn't wait. She moved, pulling Charlotte down into the shallow break, both of them dropping low as the thunder of hooves passed above and around them. Dust filled the air. The sky cracked again, closer now. Rain came in hard, sudden drops that turned the ground slick beneath their hands. For a moment, there was nothing but sound. Then it thinned. The herd pushed through. The pass opened again. Evelyn lifted her head. Charlotte was beside her, breathing hard, her hands shaking where they gripped the dirt. Her dress was streaked with mud, the ribbon at her throat gone loose. Evelyn looked up. Victor stood on higher ground now, beyond the worst of it, his horse steady, his coat still clean enough to pass for order. He didn't move toward them, didn't call down, just watched the line reform where it could. Evelyn's gaze shifted. Wyatt stood a few steps away, one hand pressed briefly against his side before dropping again. His breathing had steadied. His hat was gone. Dust streaked his shirt. He met her eyes. No question. No need to ask if she was all right. He had seen enough. Evelyn pushed herself to her feet, helped Charlotte up after her. For a moment, none of them spoke. The storm rolled past as quickly as it had come. The wind softened. The rain slowed to a thin line across the dust. The herd gathered again, smaller now, tighter, but still moving. Men called out to each other, voices returning to something like control. Victor turned away first, already giving orders, already placing things back where they belonged. Evelyn stood still. The ground beneath her felt different, not softer, clearer. She looked once more toward Wyatt. He had already stepped back into the line, already moving where he was needed, like it had been nothing. But it hadn't been, and she knew it. No one had called him back. He had turned anyway. By the time the herd settled into a slow, uneasy rhythm again, the light had thinned to gray. What little sun had been left was gone behind the hills, leaving the camp to build its shape around fire and habit. No one spoke of the storm. Men checked ropes, counted heads, adjusted what could be adjusted, the kind of work that filled space without asking questions. Evelyn sat near the outer edge of the firelight, a tin cup held between her hands. The water inside had gone lukewarm, but she hadn't noticed when it cooled. Across from her, Charlotte kept close to where Victor stood. Her posture had changed. Not much. Just enough to be seen if someone was looking for it. Victor spoke with two of the hands, his voice even, steady as ever. Nothing in it carried what had happened. Nothing in it suggested anything had gone wrong. At one point, he glanced toward Evelyn. Not long, just enough. Then he walked over, boots firm against the packed dirt. No hurry. He stopped where the firelight reached her face. "You did what you were told," he said. "It could have been approval. It could have been correction." Evelyn lifted her eyes. "I did what needed doing." Victor watched her a moment. The fire shifted, casting a different angle across his face. Shadows settled where they hadn't been before. "There's a difference," he said quietly. "Best you remember which one applies to you." The words stayed where they were. No one turned. No one stepped in. Evelyn nodded once. Victor gave a small, satisfied breath, then turned away, already finished with it. The fire cracked low. Charlotte didn't follow him right away this time. She stood still for a moment longer, then moved back to her place without speaking. Night settled in. One by one, the camp quieted. Voices faded. The fire burned down to a steady red. Evelyn stayed where she was until the last of the movement slowed. Then she stood. No one stopped her. She stepped beyond the edge of the light, where the ground dipped slightly and the wind moved freer without the shelter of bodies and canvas. The air had turned cold. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders and walked until the sounds of the camp softened behind her. Not gone, just distant enough to breathe. The sky had cleared. Stars spread wide, sharp against the dark. Evelyn sat on a flat stretch of rock, her hands resting still against her knees. For a while she did nothing, just listened. Wind, distant cattle, her own breath. Footsteps came after a time, not rushed, not searching, just steady. She didn't turn right away. Wyatt stopped a few feet from her, close enough that his presence settled into the space without pressing into it. "You shouldn't sit out too long," he said. His voice stayed low, like it belonged there. Evelyn looked out ahead of her. Didn't feel like going back. He nodded. Didn't ask why. Didn't say she should. He moved closer, then lowered himself onto the rock beside her, leaving enough space that their shoulders didn't touch. For a while, neither of them spoke. The wind shifted once, colder now. It moved through the space between them, then passed. Evelyn's hands tightened slightly in her sleeves. Without looking at her, Wyatt shrugged off his coat and set it beside her. Not over her shoulders. Just there. Close enough to take. She looked at it for a second, then pulled it around herself. It smelled like dust and leather and something clean beneath it. They sat like that. Time moved without measure. From where they were, the camp was only a glow against the ground. No faces. No voices. Just light. "I won't stay," Evelyn said after a while. The words came out even. Not rushed. Not tested. Wyatt didn't turn. "I figured." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "I stayed because there wasn't anywhere else," she said. "That's not the same as choosing it." "No," he said. "It's not." The wind pressed again, then eased. Evelyn shifted slightly, the edge of the coat brushing against his arm. She didn't move away. After a moment, she leaned. Just enough. Her head rested against his shoulder. No asking, no warning. Wyatt went still. Not stiff. Just aware. Then, slowly, he adjusted his posture, letting her settle without shifting her weight. His hand rested against the rock between them, not reaching, not pulling back. They stayed like that. The quiet stretched, but it didn't feel empty. After a while, Evelyn spoke again. "I don't think I can go back there," she said. Not loud, not uncertain. Wyatt looked out toward the dark. "You don't have to." That was all. No promise. No plan. Just the space where a decision could stand. Evelyn closed her eyes. For the first time since the storm, her breathing slowed. The wind moved around them. The night held, and somewhere behind them, the camp waited. But she didn't turn. Not this time. Morning came slow, like the land itself wasn't ready to move yet. The fire had burned down to ash. A thin line of smoke drifted low across the ground. Somewhere off to the east, a bird called once, then went quiet again. Evelyn woke before the others. She sat up without hurry, Wyatt's coat still around her shoulders. The rock beneath her held the cold from the night. For a moment, she stayed there, hands resting still, eyes on the pale stretch of horizon where the light was just beginning to show. Behind her, the camp had already started to stir. Low voices, the clink of metal, a horse shifting against its tether. She stood, folded the coat once, then held it in her hands a second longer than needed. Wyatt was a short distance away, already on his feet. He hadn't slept much. It showed in the way he moved, steady but slower to settle. She walked over and held the coat out. He took it without brushing her hand. "Thank you," she said. He gave a small nod. "You warm enough?" She was. She didn't say it. Back at the camp, something had changed. Charlotte stood near the center, not beside Victor this time. Her dress was still marked from the storm. The ribbon at her throat hung loose, one end darker where it had soaked through. Victor was speaking. Not loudly. He never needed to. "We move within the hour," he said. "Lost ground can be made up." Charlotte didn't answer. He turned toward her, expecting it. She didn't step closer. "I won't be going," she said. The words didn't rise. They didn't carry far, but they landed. Victor blinked once. Just once. "You're tired," he said. "That's all." Charlotte shook her head. No. Silence spread out from them. Not sudden, just steady, like water finding space. "I waited last night," she said, "for you to turn back." Victor's expression didn't change. "That wasn't the call," he said. "The herd comes first." Charlotte's hands tightened at her sides. "Yes," she said. "It does. For you." He watched her, measured. "You don't understand how this works," he said. "I do," she answered. "That's why I'm done with it." The space shifted. A man nearby looked down at his boots. Another adjusted a strap that didn't need adjusting. Victor let out a breath. Not anger. Not yet. "You'll regret walking away from this," he said. Charlotte met his eyes. "Not as much as I'd regret staying." She stepped back. Not toward him. Toward Evelyn. They didn't touch. Didn't speak. But they stood side by side. Victor looked at them both, then past them, already turning his attention elsewhere. Like something had been set aside. Like it didn't matter. But it did. Evelyn felt it settle in her chest. Not sharp, not heavy. Clear. She turned before anyone could call her name, if they had meant to. She walked to where her things had been kept. There wasn't much. A small cloth bag, a folded scarf, a tin cup tied along the side. She picked them up. No one stopped her. No one asked where she was going. She moved through the edge of the camp, past the line where the ground turned from trampled dirt back to open land. The road stretched ahead, dry, unmarked. Wyatt met her there. He didn't stand in her way, didn't reach for her. He held the reins of a horse instead, one she had ridden before. "The road's long," he said. She looked at him. He placed the reins in her hand. "Take it." That was all. No promise. No asking her to stay. Evelyn nodded. She mounted without help, settled into the saddle, adjusted the bag at her side. For a moment she sat there. Then she looked back. Not at the camp, at him. Their eyes met. No words passed between them. They didn't need to. She turned forward. The horse moved under her, steady and sure. Distance opened slow. Behind her, the camp faded. The voices, the shape of what had been. Ahead, there was nothing yet. Just land. Time moved, not all at once. Seasons came through in small ways. Wind shifting direction. Grass thinning, then returning. Fences built one post at a time. At Dry Willow Ridge, the ground wasn't good. That was why it had been left. But it held. Evelyn worked it with her hands, same as everything else she had ever kept. Water hauled from a low well that needed tending twice a week. Boards patched where the wind found its way through. A roof that learned to hold. Wyatt came and went at first. Work called him back to other places. Then less often. Then not at all. He stayed. Not because he said he would, because he didn't leave. They built the place between them. Not fast, not clean, but solid. One evening, years later, the sun dropped low across the ridge, laying long shadows across the yard. Evelyn stood on the porch, one hand resting against the frame of the door. It was open, not wide, just enough. A man stood at the edge of the yard, his hat in his hands, dust thick along his coat. "Ma'am," he said, "is there a place I might sit for a while?" Evelyn looked at him, then stepped aside. "There is." Inside, the kettle was already warm. She set a cup down without asking anything more. From the yard, Wyatt's voice carried in. "Evelyn." Not loud, just enough. She stepped out without thinking. He stood near the fence, one hand resting on the top rail, looking toward the line where the land met the sky. She walked to him, didn't stop short, didn't wait. Her name settled between them like something that had always belonged there. And this time, it stayed. If you stood where Evelyn once stood, at the edge of a room where no one called your name, you might remember how quiet that kind of loneliness can be. Not loud, not cruel, just empty in a way that settles deep and lingers. And maybe you'd understand why she didn't turn back. Because sometimes, it isn't about finding someone who chooses you. It's about deciding you won't stay where you're never seen. About stepping onto a road with no promise, just a quiet knowing that you deserve more than a place handed to you out of habit. Wyatt never tried to hold her there. He didn't offer a life in words. He simply stood where she could see him and let her choose her own way. And somehow, that made all the difference. Maybe that's the kind of love that lasts. Not the kind that saves you, but the kind that gives you room to stand on your own and still finds you there. If you've ever had to walk away from a place that never felt like yours, or found the courage to begin again, I'd really like to hear about it. Just a line is enough. And if this story stayed with you for a while, there are more like it waiting here. Quiet stories, honest ones, the kind you can sit with, like a fire that doesn't rush you to leave. You're always welcome back.